Right, I've got here a standard GTti turbo. It's a VQ10 RHB5. So this is the earlier type, non-water cooled, and it looks alright. There's no sort of play that I can feel, tiny bit side to side, it's normal. I've actually had this apart before, so that means I'm not going to really have any problems, with these bolts. I know that they're all a bit loose. That's going to be the main problem if you strip an old turbo, is particularly these 10mm bolts, no, they're 8s, that hold the core to the turbine housing. I mean, they just get so rusted up and seized. In fact, one's snapped off there. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly get this apart. So the first thing I would do is to remove the actuator. Okay, so there's a circlip. I don't know if you can see. Basically, under the rod here, there's a circlip. So that needs to come off. Just bring it off. Let's have a look. A bit fiddly sometimes. And again, that's been off before, so there it is. Right, so that's off, and now this rod will lift out of the wastegate arm. So now you've got to actually remove the wastegate actuator, and it's just held on with the small M6 bolts, which also acts to hold the compressor housing on. A bit fiddly there. In fact, these are all only just nipped up. I can do this with my fingers, but this side of the turbo is normally not too bad. You don't get problems with things seizing up. That one is again finger tight at the bottom. Hopefully you can see a little bit of what I'm doing here. So anyway, that's the first thing to get, well, I find that's the first thing to get out of the way. So there's the actuator. Okay, so that's fine. So now we've got a few more. Again, there's only one. In fact, there's only one more holding on at the moment. One more clamp for the compressor housing. So again, that's finger tight. Now, what I would normally say actually is you want to actually slacken them off just a little bit. Don't remove them fully, because this can often be a little bit tight to get off. Not in this case. But you've got to be careful when you remove the compressor housing that it comes off straight. You don't want it to come off twisted, because it could actually damage the compressor wheel. So it's just worth giving it a little bit of a tap all the way around. Try and loosen it up before you actually take all the bolts out. So that's going to come straight off in a moment. What I'm going to do next, again, these bolts that hold the core to the turbine housing, they're all loose, so that's not going to be a problem. That, like I said earlier, is going to be your biggest pain to start with if they're seized up. What you might want to do at this stage as well, before the compressor housing comes off, is to actually slacken the nut that holds the compressor wheel on, just so at the moment it's protected. You're not going to damage the wheel as easily. if you slip. So to do that, what you've got to do is to hold the turbine wheel still, and that's a 10mm, I think it's 10. It's a 12-sided head that you can actually put a... I think I've got it now. I'm not going to get that off easily without a socket, in fact. No, I'll have to wait, but you can actually slacken that off with a... hold the turbine still, and with an 8mm onto the compressor wheel nut, and you turn it opposite to normal because it's a reverse thread. So that's something to watch for as well. Anyway, let me get this off and then it will be... get this compressor cover off. As like I say, you've got to be careful that it comes off reasonably straight. So there's the compressor cover or compressor housing, and as long as that's never had any, as long as the wheel's never contacted inside, it's never made contact with the housing, you know, it should last forever really. It's obviously grubby, but that will clean up, so that's fine. So obviously here's the compressor wheel now, and this is the nut you need to slacken off. So I'll be able to do that now because I've got with my spanner. So again, it's anti-clockwise to slacken. Sorry, clockwise. Clockwise to slacken because it's a reverse thread. Anyway, that, I mean, again, they're not, it shouldn't be particularly tight. So now the compressor wheel will pull off, but it's normally a bit awkward because, again, it's been on there for a long time, it's a tight fit anyway, and you don't want to just be grabbing the wheel any old how because it's quite delicate. It's quite easy to bend the vanes. So next stage will be to, before I start struggling to get this off, is to actually remove the turbine housing. And I'm pretty sure these will all... Well, you've really got to be careful though that you don't knock the compressor wheel or put the turbo down on it. You know, you don't want to be bending the wheel at all. Again, like I said earlier, when you've got these slack but not removed, you want to actually start tapping the housing to try and get it free and loose. It might take a few whacks. This one is loose anyway. So this should now almost fall off, I hope. I'm just going to need a little bit of a tap. Ooh, there we are. Luckily that came off nice and straight. So there's the centre of the turbo. Obviously it's still fully assembled apart from the two housings that are now off. Now this housing is pretty reasonable as they go. There's a small crack which is completely normal, but it's perfectly usable still. Just needs a good clean up. Right, so now to get the compressor wheel off, it's going to be a lot easier because we can actually push the turbine shaft out slightly, which will loosen up this wheel. Just going to screw this Just going to screw this gloves are ripped already. I'm just screwing the nut back on a few threads because I'm going to give it a tap. Got to be careful at this stage that you don't miss and end up smacking your wheel. But I'm going to tap the turbine shaft out. You can see it's starting to move. Let's unscrew that now. Right, so now give that another push it back in again. You can see now that I've lifted off the compressor wheel from where it's seated, and I should be able to wiggle this off the shaft. And it's coming again. It wouldn't be quite as easy as this normally, but it's just a case of being careful and pulling off that compressor wheel. Yeah, it's reasonable. I mean, there's a little bit of pitting to the leading edges of this wheel, and the corners are slightly rounded off. So I mean, I guess it's not had the best quality air filter when this was on the car. But that's again, it's usable. So now this turbine shaft should push straight out. Give it a little bit of a tap again. So there we are. And it looks alright. I mean, it's now what you can see here is a lot of, I don't know if you can see or not, but there's a lot of carbonised oil all around that. It looks pretty knacky. Right, this just falls off. It's what they call the heat shield, and that also acts as a seal from the core assembly here into the turbine housing. You can see here the amount of carbon and crap build up is quite bad. So the problem is you couldn't go about now sort of cleaning this up nicely without the risk of bits going in. So if you want to make a good job of it, you've got to really strip the whole thing down. So anyway, that's what we call the core bearing housings. Okay, so now this is again is another tricky part. These three like Torx head screws are a pain. In fact, this is the probably one of the only turbos I've actually managed to undo all these three previously without too much problem. The rest of you always round these off. So I've got the correct fitting screw bit. Yeah, I mean, I remember assembling this, loosely. In fact, I can probably take that bit out. Right. You don't need to worry about, I mean, these screws, if you've got a rebuild kit, they're going to be in there. Should be. Now this plate here, again, it's not easy to get out. It's a tight fit. But there's a trick. Now there's two holes here and here, which is threaded. I think it's a M5. It's M4, M5. Box here. Just got some screws I'm going to thread and just screw into a little bit. Just a few turns, and what that would enable me to do is to lever it out. In fact, I can see it's moving already, but I remember having a right job with this. So I've just screwed them in there, finger tight, and now you can lever and help you to get this out. I'm going to have to get a bit more. I'm going to go at both ends. In fact, it is a bit stiff. Some stick. Well, it's moving. It's coming out. Oh, that's better. Sure that'll be alright now. Unscrew those. Try again. It's almost out, but it's just. There we are. And then inside here we've got more of the damn things. And this is as far as I can go with this, showing you this, because only one of them. I've actually managed to get this undone, one of them, but the rest of the heads are rounded off. Just couldn't do it. But you see, that's essentially all there is to it. Once you get this off, again, there's some circlips inside. Obviously the bearings as well are in there, but it's pretty self-explanatory when you get that apart. In terms of fitting a hybrid, well, we hear obviously people making hybrids up. The only difference is the compressor wheel is bigger. Now the problem you'll have with the standard wheel here, this ridge, this is designed to fit this wheel. Now there's 3 or 4 wheels on different turbos that are the same diameter that will just fit on. But they're still bigger, they've got bigger inducer blades, these ones here. So they'll fit on easily. Any of the bigger wheels, like from the 4-track or the 323 Mazda, then you're going to need to get this machined slightly larger to get the larger wheel on. Unless you've actually got the core for that particular turbo, which will still fit then onto the hot side. So it's all pretty self-explanatory. Like I say, when you get it apart, the main things to watch at the beginning certainly is that you you take care not to damage the compressor wheel if you're going to reuse that. And well, really, it's just the bolts that are a hassle. In fact, that stud there, I think that will unscrew, because I actually used the Dremel to grind a slot into that. I had to shave that head off for that to get it off. So in terms of making a hybrid, you would only need to go to the stage where, let's put this back in, let's come out with it. You know, you'd only have to get to the stage where you've removed the compressor cover and basically remove this housing to change the compressor wheel. But it should be balanced as well, really. But got this well and truly seized now. Alright, that's that.